Hello and welcome to the last in the series I've been doing on intelligence. This is episode 7 in that little series, and we're going to be talking about Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. Now, the last episode we talked about the triarchic theory by Sternberg, and the multiple intelligent idea that is represented in that triarchic theory is not so much about different kinds of intelligence, but different applications. So you had pragmatic, creative, and then of course the logical sort of normal IQ type thing. Now, Howard Gardner kind of approaches this from a different way, and he looks at maybe almost like a skill sets of different types of ways in which intelligence manifests itself. So let's first off take a look at the man, Howard Gardner. Howard Gardner is currently a professor of cognition at Harvard University. His research has focused on intelligence. He has a book actually called The App Generation, looking at the cognitive implications of cell phones and apps that are on cell phones. His current work focuses on higher education, and he just wrote a book, autobiographical, related to the process of synthesis, which is this idea of bringing ideas together into cohesive wholes. So just active writer, active researcher. Just a few years ago, he turned 70, and he's still going, and we're, of course, very pleased. He has over 34 books out. He's a prolific writer. If you go to howardgardner.com, you can actually download his curriculum vitae, and it is, like 80 pages long of publications after publications. I mean, just a prolific writer, similar to Sternberg with his 1,500 publications and whatnot. Just immense contributors to the field of psychology, and how cool it is to have these people in our world. Now, although I did meet, my little story is this, although I did meet Sternberg, I have not yet met Howard Gardner. I was at one time in Massachusetts. I went to Cambridge, went onto the campus of Harvard University, went to the psych department and tried to find him. And just so I could knock on his door and say hi. I did not know at that point that he had actually transferred over to the Department of Education. He had moved from the Department of Psychology over the Department of Education. So I missed my chance. He might not have been there. I don't know. But I personally have not met him. I've watched lots of videos. He's a very good lecturer. Take the opportunity to look up some of his stuff and get to know a really brilliant mind. Now, what he has given us in terms of the context of this subject is a view on intelligence that is incredibly popular and incredibly useful, and it's Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. And we can see represented by this graphic, we have the different kinds of intelligences that he focused on. Now, I want to take some time to quickly kind of go through each one of them. So let's take a look first at musical intelligence. And what does it mean, from Gardner's point of view, to have musical intelligence? And we'll see that musical intelligence entails a sensitivity to rhythm, pitch, meter, tone, melody, and timbre. It may entail the ability to sing, play musical instruments, and/or compose music. So we're probably all familiar with a musician or individuals that can carry a tune, or maybe someone who remembers the third song on the B side of Dark Side of the Moon or something like that, and just has a way of remembering all of that. I mean, as a musician myself, I encounter musicians that have incredible musical memories, can remember melodies and chords and compositions and whatnot, and people who write music, and of course the famous writers of over all of the years, incredible musical talent. Those individuals would be said to have very high musical intelligence. Now, the next one we have is visual spatial. Now, I like to think of this one when I first encountered this as the individual who is able to compose a picture, just a simplistic way of thinking of that. All of us have probably, we all have our phones with cameras now, and we hold it up and we take a picture. And some of us can't take a good composed picture no matter what. You know, it was a beautiful scene. I took a picture. It looks crappy on my phone. And yet others seem to be able to assess what needs to be in the image. Where does the tree need to be? Where's the subject? Where's the sun? And they take these pictures and they're just museum quality, just really, really good. See that sort of part of this spatial quality. Now, according to Gardner, visual spatial intelligence is the ability to conceptualize and manipulate large-scale spatial arrays. This is airplane pilots, sailors being able to navigate, or more local forms of spatial arrays, such as an architect and a chess player. So those individuals having high visual spatial intelligence. Our next one is intrapersonal, and we're going to be talking about interpersonal as contrasting to this, but intrapersonal has to do with a person's sensitivity to their own feelings. Interpersonal, we're going to see as others. A sensitivity to one's own feelings, their goals and anxieties, and capacity to plan and act based on insights of one's own traits. So this is this characteristic of intrapersonal. It's the know yourself essential quality of this particular kind of intelligence. Next, we look at naturalistic, and I'm going to have to admit that when this one came out, it used to be only 7, and then this became 8. I was sort of like, well, he's kind of responding to the, environmental movement and stuff like that. But it really isn't. As much as it is recognizing, however, that at the time when I was exposed to this particular kind of intelligence, it had to do with sort of a ability to recognize ecology or the connectedness between things, particularly how it manifests in the natural world. So here we have the ability to make consequential distinctions in the world of nature, such as, for example, between one plant and another and the connections between all living things. We move on to logical and mathematical, and certainly this is one of the areas that's measured in regular IQ tests. And we have the capacity to conceptualize logical relations among actions or symbols. And actions are important here, not just symbols like mathematical symbols, but you think about something that goes along with musical intelligence. Actually, music is actually very mathematical in terms of angles, in terms of spaces, the distance between two notes, the interval between one note and another. Those are mathematical calculations that determine those different waveforms. And so there's a lot of math underneath the concept of musical intelligence, and that too can be represented in this kind of intelligence here, this mathematical intelligence. Next, we look at verbal and linguistic. Again, another characteristic that is very well represented in traditional IQ tests. And this is a sensitivity to the meanings of words, the order among words, the sounds, rhythms, inflections, and meter of words. Individuals who are good writers, good readers, enjoy plays, enjoy orations, enjoy the written word, read poetry, those kinds of things. These are individuals that we would presume have very high linguistic intelligence. We move into interpersonal intelligence, and this is, like it says you can see people smart. This is the ability to interact effectively with others, sensitivity to others' moods, feelings, temperaments, and motivations. I personally like to think of this in terms of emotional intelligence. The concept of emotional intelligence wraps itself around this and intrapersonal. So emotional intelligence, the ability to manage emotions, manage people's motivations, to understand the interrelation between my emotions and others, how to manage my own emotions when I'm excited or when I'm disappointed or frustrated or scared. All of these things, that skill set sort of encompasses that same area that Gardner's talking about in these two separate intelligences. What I like about Gardner's particular approach is that he separates them out. One does not imply the other. There's plenty of individuals that I know that know themselves really well, understand their own emotional world, but struggle to understand other people's perspective. Conversely, we have individuals, great counselors. They can listen, understand, emote where people are coming from, but yet their own lives can be in upheaval, and they have very difficult time managing their own emotional worlds. So those are separate in Gardner's world, kind of under the umbrella of a group of skills that we call emotional intelligence. But see, both of those theories, they're not in contradiction to each other. They're just different views of the same sort of phenomenon. Then we head into our last one, body kinesthetic. And of course, what we would see here, the ability to use one's whole body or parts of the body to solve problems or create products. So we see the individual who's athletic, artistic, combine that with spatial, combine that with mathematical, you can see how these create the artist, let's say. But the individual who's coordinated, the good dancer, the good athlete, but also the person who can work with their, with minute, small objects. Or they're able to, let's say we take that with the spatial intelligence and an individual who can conceptualize the way machines work and repair them, and working with their hands to make things work or fit together. Those kinds of things. Puzzle makers, that's not only spatial, but also kinesthetic, in terms of operating their bodies to solve problems. Now, those are the 8 types of intelligence. Now, Gardner, in creating these, curated these particular areas very, very specifically based on principles that he wanted to bring to the world of intelligence. And the first principle was intelligence is comprised of human intellect's toolkit. He is just like many of the modern people who are studying intelligence, very opposed to the notion of a one single factor intelligence. Certainly he came up with 8 of them. They encompass the IQ score. They encompass to some degree Sternberg's theory as well. But these 8 intelligences represent a toolkit that individuals use to varying degrees of ability to manage their way through life. And oftentimes attracted to situations that tend to coincide with the particular intelligences that they have. And so an important quality of the principle behind multiple intelligence is that intelligence is a toolkit of multiple tools. And each person has a distinct intellectual profile, advantages and disadvantages, things they're good at, things they're not as good at. Now, the implications of this, of course, are individuals, because they have a distinct intellectual profile, teachers can take this into consideration in terms of how they approach teaching that individual. Now, that said, it's not that we don't challenge people in the areas of their intellect in which they would be weak. In fact, that might be the method. Rather than saying, these are quote unquote learning styles. So if somebody has really high mathematical intelligence, then we don't have to create all of our teaching methods to be encased in mathematical problems, because those will be more accessible. In fact, we might be able to set aside the mathematical one. They've got that, and we're going to focus on the areas of weakness, and that would be the purpose of education. Now, and I say focusing on the areas of weakness, we may build upon the strengths of the individual, but we would maybe teach and explore ways for that individual to enhance all other aspects of their intelligence. Some of them will come easy, some of them will come with more difficulty. Now, That said, another implication is that ideas, conversely, ideas can be taught in different ways. That truthfully, I can teach music using math. I can teach music using body kinesthetics. I can teach music using interpersonal intelligence. You can see I can look at the words of the songs for the interpersonal. I can use the rhythm and actually dancing and moving to the rhythm, body kinesthetic. And I can actually calculate for my mathematical thinkers, teaching them about the relationship between notes that are in harmony with each other mathematically. So you can see that any single topic could probably be expanded to be taught in a way that encompasses all of the different intelligences, and what a rich educational experience that would be, regardless of the skill set someone's arriving at when they enter into that learning situation. Now, Gardner himself, and in his publications, is very careful to delineate ways in which his theory has been used correctly and incorrectly, and he advocates through a website good practices and malpractices. So let's take a visit to his website. See if I can get this going here. I don't think I can. I can't click on it, so I'm going to go to it. Sorry about that. Here is his website. Right here. So here we have the actual website for Howard Gardner, Multiple Intelligence. And we see good practices, and we have links to his books, Multiple Intelligences Around the World, Project Spectrum, which is a collaborative research project from Harvard Project Zero. Project Spectrum sought to offer an alternative approach to assessment and curriculum development. Explorama, Scratch, this is a programming language for kindergarten. Small Lab Learning, multimedia arts learning, and Makey, which is actually self-paced learning opportunities that operate on STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, up here, he also has, there's a good practices and malpractices. So in the malpractices, there's no such thing as a one cannot infer intelligence based on fingerprints. There's no meaning behind fingerprints or anything like that. I'm not even sure where all that came from. Like, apparently some people think your fingerprints say something about your intelligence. Howard Gardner has chosen not to do research to differentiate between groups of individuals. Feels that this is bad scientific practice. And then he reviews a number of myths. And of course, here we have myth number 1. Now that the intelligence have been identified, researchers should develop tests to measure these intelligences. No, some of these are not really subject to that kind of testing. So he doesn't feel it's really a good thing to do. So let's go back here to my slideshow. Here we have good practices, malpractices. Here's that link that I couldn't actually use here when I'm doing this. But I do want to point out here a particular use of language, and that is good practices, not best practices. Good practices. I think that this is a vital distinction, and I really applaud Gardner in doing this. Is there's a strong commitment of many people to seek out what we would call best practice. Now, the best practice for working with an individual and taking into account that person's intellect is going to be specific to that individual. So what's best Frank might not be best for Sally. And so to define something as best practice is to say that the other practices are somehow less than. The point that Gardner has in this, really, it really, as I would say, it resonates with a deeper philosophy I have about psychology in general, that good practice supersedes thoughtful, well-documented, evidence-based, but there's not just one way that we're going to call the best. There's good practices, and there's ways in which we can do our practice that are maladaptive and simply have been shown not to work. I think it's a very, very good indication. We don't have to seek the best. We have to seek the appropriate one for the situation that we're dealing with. So that ends our exploration of intelligence. Here we have these two great theories of multiple intelligence, while at the same time we're still holding on to IQ, achievement tests, the SATs, the GREs. Those are all still valuable. The actual original thoughts about intelligence, still valuable. All of these things are current ideas about this very, very commonly used term, intelligence, and how rich and diverse and continually mysterious this aspect of humans are. So thank you for riding out these 7 videos with me, and have a great day.